Welcome back to the deep dive. We're continuing our journey through the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPEP. We're digging into another section today.
That's right. In this series, it's really all about trying to make these MPT guidelines a bit more accessible, turning them into, well, clear summaries.
Yeah, the goal is to help you get a handle on the structure, the requirements for a U.S. patent application without needing to, wade through every single detail yourself.
Exactly. We're trying to pull out the key stuff for you.
And today we're heading into MTP Chapter 600. That covers the parts, form, and content of application. Specifically, we're zooming in on something that seems small, but isn't trivial at all. Section 606.
Section 606, all about the title of invention.
Right. So the mission for us today is basically unpacking the rules, the best practices for actually crafting that title for an invention.
We're pulling out the most important points from the source material, trying to show why this first step, choosing a title, actually matters quite a bit.
Okay, let's get into it. So the title, just a few words, sits at the top. What's the number one rule? The fundamental thing you need to know.
Well, yeah, it seems simple, but there are definite rules. The core requirement, this comes from 37 CFR 1.72a, is that the title must be short and specific.
Short and specific.
And limited. It can't be more than 500 characters.
500 characters. Okay, that seems fair. Short, specific, under 500. What's the point, though? What's the title really trying to do?
Its main job is really crucial. It needs to accurately describe the invention, and importantly, using technical terms.
Technical terms.
Yeah, the guidance is pretty clear. Avoid unnecessary fluff, vague language or embellishments. It's less like a catchy headline and more like a precise technical label.
Got it. Just the facts,
Yeah.
the technical essence, clear and concise. And where does this title actually go in the application documents?
So if you don't provide it through the application data sheet, that's the ADS, basically the cover sheet with key info, then it goes right at the top.
Top of what?
Top of the first page of the specification, the detailed written description of the invention itself.
Ah, okay. So it's literally the first thing you might read when you dive into the details. Now, here's something I found interesting in the source material, maybe a bit counterintuitive. There are specific words you're told not to use, especially at the start.
Yes. It does seem odd at first, doesn't it? But you're specifically cautioned not to begin your title with words like a, an, the, or even things like improved, novel, or related to.
Why, though? Why avoid those? They seem pretty harmless.
Well, it's not arbitrary. It actually tells you something fundamental about how the Patent Office views these titles. They aren't just descriptive phrases for humans. They're really key identifiers for a massive technical database.
Identifiers for a database. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. So those specific words mess up the database indexing somehow.
Exactly right. The automated systems at the USPTO, they're optimized for technical keywords for specificity. Those words, the improved, they're seen as, well, generic, non-substantive for indexing.
Say they just get ignored.
Worse than ignored, really. The MPP is very direct here. It says they will be deleted. Yep. Deleted when the title gets entered into the USPTO systems, and they won't appear on the issued patent either. So starting with them, it's kind of pointless. You're just adding words that are going to get stripped out.
Huh. So it's all about searchability, classification, how the system handles it downstream. That makes sense. Are there exceptions? Can you ever use words like that?
Yes, there are a few exceptions noted. Terms like new or design, for instance, can sometimes be kept, but only if they're really an integral part of a proper noun or a specific recognized technical phrase.
Like when?
Well, the examples giving are things like New York, where new is part of the name, or something like design aiding apparatus. In those cases, the word isn't just a vague modifier, it's actually part of a specific term needed for accuracy.
Okay, that distinction is key. So the rule is generally short, specific, technical, avoid those initial generic words. What happens if someone submits a title that, well, just doesn't cut it, if it's too vague or breaks the rules?
Yeah, the USPTO doesn't just let that go. And this is where the examiner steps in. It really shows how much weight the title carries in the whole process.
The examiner gets involved.
Absolutely. MPP section 606.01 makes it clear. Examiners have the authority, actually, the responsibility to require a change if the title isn't descriptive enough of the invention that's actually being claimed.
They can demand a rewrite. How do they tell the applicant?
They typically use standard communications, form paragraphs.
Yeah.
The MPP mentions specific ones like 6.11 and 6.11.01. These basically tell the applicant, hey, this title isn't working.
Do they just say it's bad or do they help?
Oh, they often help. The examiner might even suggest a better alternative title, one that's more appropriate, more descriptive.
Can you give that example from the source material, the one comparing a bad title to a good suggestion?
Sure. It's a great illustration. The source contrasts a really vague title, something like just improved device.
Yeah, that tells you basically nothing.
Exactly. It's almost meaningless. An examiner seeing that might suggest something much more concrete, like a portable battery-powered water purification unit.
Whoa, okay, that's night and day. The second one paints a really clear picture.
Right. And notice the suggested title might actually be a bit longer than improved device, but the MPP points out that the extra length is worth it because the specificity dramatically improves clarity.
Clarity, and you mentioned classification.
Yes. Clarity, classification within the Patent Office's systems, and crucially, retrieval. It makes it much easier for other examiners, researchers, the public, anyone to find that patent later when searching for similar technologies.
So it's a trade-off. Specificity and searchability trump absolute brevity if the title is just too vague. Makes sense. What if the applicant digs their heels in? Examiner suggests a change, maybe offers alternatives, but the applicant just doesn't provide an acceptable revision.
Well, the examiner holds the cards here, ultimately. If an applicant fails to provide a suitable title after being asked, the examiner can actually amend the title themselves.
The examiner just changes it. When does that happen?
They can do it directly at the time the application is allowed, right before it becomes a patent.
Wow. Okay, that really drives home the point that the title needs to function correctly for their system. It's clearly not just, a cosmetic detail.
Precisely. And that brings us to the sort of the deeper meaning or significance here. The title isn't just a formality. It's playing a real administrative and even legal role right from the start.
What kind of practical impacts does it have beyond just being the label?
Well, like we saw with the examiner example, a good title directly helps with indexing, with understanding what the invention actually is. It's really important for making sure the application slots correctly into the USPTO's internal machinery.
You mean their classification systems and how they search?
Exactly. Their complex classification schemes, how examiners find prior art, how the public searches patents later on. A good title helps all of that function smoothly.
And does the title pop up elsewhere in the MPP process? Is it used for identification beyond just the main filing?
Oh yeah, definitely. The guidance points this out. Titles get used, for example, to identify abandoned applications if they're being relied upon for something. They're part of the data package for international applications.
Okay.
And in design patents, the title is specifically used to designate the article of manufacture that the design applies to. So it's a consistent identifier used across different procedures.
So this seemingly minor thing, just a few words, it really acts as a kind of critical anchor. It pins down the identity of the invention throughout its whole life in the patent system and even afterwards.
It really does. It's one of those details in IP where a small choice up front can have these significant ripple effects down the line.
That definitely gives us, and hopefully you listening, a much better appreciation for why getting that title right actually matters. Okay, that wraps up our deep dive into MPP Section 606. First, though, a very special thank you is due.
Yes, absolutely. To Mike Shepard, the creative director who put this whole audio series together for us.
Thank you, Mike. And now we have the necessary disclaimer.
Right. Please note, disclaimer. This summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and NotebookLM, and may contain errors or omissions.
It is provided for general educational and informational purposes only. It is not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction.
For authoritative guidance, please consult the official MPEP, a qualified instructor, or a registered patent practitioner.
So as you think about this, maybe reflect on how choosing just a few words for a title, something that seems so simple, can really shape how an invention is seen, how it's found, how it's categorized legally within this huge system of intellectual property.
Yeah, what really jumps out to you about the power that's packed into that short, concise description? Something to think about.